Not that long ago, the company you work for could also own your house, your town's school, the grocery store, and even the streets. Every dollar you made was given right back to your boss in a never-ending cycle, and being fired meant losing everything immediately. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we are uncovering the most infamous company towns of America. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Imagine stepping off a train in the late 1800s and entering a perfectly manicured town where every brick building, every iron fence, and every blade of grass seems to be part of a single unified design. The houses line the streets with uniform precision. The church, the school, and the general store all share the same architectural style. Neighbors work at the same factory, pay their rent to the same company that signs their paychecks, and buy groceries, tools, and clothes on company credit at a company-owned store. This was the world of the American company town, a remarkable experiment that once dotted the nation's industrial landscape, offering a curious blend of paternalistic control and modern convenience. Although these towns sprang up in various shapes and sizes, they all revolved around one big idea: that a corporation could not only employ a workforce, but also house, feed, educate, and govern them all under one roof. To appreciate how these communities came to be, it's important to remember the frenetic energy of post-Civil War industrialization. Railroads rapidly expanded across the continent, factories multiplied, and entrepreneurs scrambled for labor in remote or newly developed areas. Skilled and unskilled workers alike were drawn from rural farms, across oceans, and from other cities, wherever the promise of steady wages beckoned. Yet once a business set up shop in an out-of-the-way location, perhaps to be near resources such as coal, iron, or timber, there were immediate logistical headaches. Where would the workers live? How would they get groceries or send their children to school? State and local governments were sometimes ill-equipped to provide infrastructure at the speed industry required. The company town model seemed like the perfect solution. By placing housing, stores, and amenities right beside the factory, mine, or mill, a corporation could sidestep public bureaucracy and keep the workforce literally on its doorstep. One of the earliest and most frequently cited examples was Pullman, Illinois, founded in the 1880s by George Pullman of the Pullman Palace Car Company. Pullman wasn't just building passenger rail cars, he was crafting a grand vision of labor harmony. His town was laid out with landscape parks, ornate public buildings, and brick houses boasting modern features like indoor plumbing. The press of the day touted it as a model community, and visitors marveled at how clean and orderly everything seemed, especially compared to the gritty, haphazard boomtowns springing up elsewhere. Yet beneath the surface of this controlled elegance lay a tension that would eventually boil over. Workers soon found that the benevolence of Pullman's amenities came at a steep price. Rents in Pullman-run housing were high, leaving many families scraping by after paychecks were docked for utilities, groceries, and even library fees. When the 1890s economic downturn hit, George Pullman slashed wages but did not lower rents, driving workers into deep debt. This simmering discontent erupted into the 1894 Pullman strike, a turning point in American labor history that laid bare the uncomfortable reality. In a company town, the employer held all the cards, controlling not just livelihood, but daily life itself. Pullman's story is instructive, but it's hardly the only tale. Across coal-rich Appalachia, entire settlements were built around mines, with row after row of boxy houses clinging to steep hillsides. Coal operators, such as those in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, recognized that the rugged terrain and lack of existing infrastructure made it tough for workers to commute from outside towns. So the company stepped in, laying down rail lines, building basic housing, and running general stores stocked with anything a miner and his family might need, at a markup of course. Often, wages came in the form of scrip, a pseudo-currency only valid at the company's store. This system erased the operator's cash flow issues, but locked the workforce into a cycle of dependency. When the cost of food, tools, and rent rose faster than wages, workers racked up debt they simply couldn't escape, effectively chaining entire families to a single employer for generations. It wasn't always an unrelentingly grim story. Some company towns, such as Hershey, Pennsylvania, presented a more positive face. Milton Hershey built his chocolate empire in a rural region where dairy farms supplied a virtually endless supply of fresh milk, perfect for making milk chocolate at scale. Recognizing the need for a stable workforce, Hershey created a picturesque town complete with tree-lined streets, comfortable homes, an amusement park, a zoo, and the prestigious Milton Hershey School for orphan boys. Many residents enjoyed a genuinely improved quality of life compared to what they might have found elsewhere, and the sense of community and pride in their company was palpable. Yet even in the success story, paternalistic control remained. Hershey's plans dictated what type of business could set up shop, frowned upon rowdy saloons, and generally made sure the public face of Hershey, Pennsylvania stayed squeaky clean to protect the Chocolate King's brand. Further north, in Lowell, Massachusetts, an earlier model of industrial living had set important precedents. In the 1820s and 1830s, Lowell's textile mills attracted young women, often farmers' daughters, who lived in supervised boarding houses operated by the mill owners. These establishments enforced strict rules, from curfews to mandatory church attendance, all under the umbrella of protecting the virtue of the women in the workforce. While not a fully autonomous company town, Lowell's paternalistic environment offered a prototype: corporate oversight over housing, social activities, and moral behavior in the name of efficiency and worker well-being. At first, conditions were relatively decent, with philanthropic owners emphasizing education and culture. Over time, though, as profits became tighter, wages were lowered and conditions deteriorated. Discontent among the so-called mill girls eventually manifested in public protests, providing an early glimpse of how labor and paternalistic communities could organize and demand rights. In other corners of the country, steel towns cropped up along the Great Lakes and the Ohio River, where smelters and furnaces needed boatloads of iron ore and coal. Cities like Gary, Indiana, founded by U.S. Steel, attempted large-scale community planning. Meanwhile, in Tennessee, the Aluminum Company of America developed Alcoa, a purpose-built town that featured modern amenities for workers smelting and rolling aluminum. These places often touted the phrase welfare capitalism, a term that implied a kind-hearted synergy between corporate interests and worker needs. Supporters of this model pointed to paved streets, relatively sanitary living conditions, at least compared to the slums in major cities, and the presence of schools and hospitals funded by the company. However, critics noted that the employer's stake in keeping residents content could easily morph into suppressing dissent or ignoring workers' complaints about safety and fair wages. In a one-company environment, forming a labor union or even publicly criticizing workplace conditions could mean not just losing a job, but losing your home and the local store's line of credit. Tensions in these towns frequently culminated in dramatic confrontations, some of which took tragic turns. In Colorado's coal region, for example, the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company owned various mining camps. When workers called a strike in 1913 to protest dangerous conditions and poor pay, the situation deteriorated until the infamous Ludlow Massacre in 1914, during which the Colorado National Guard attacked a tent colony of striking miners and their families. The pitched battle resulted in multiple casualties, including women and children, and it stood as a brutal example as to how company-sponsored control could spiral into outright conflict. With a corporation essentially running the towns, the line separating law enforcement, local governance, and the company's private interests blurred dangerously. Such cataclysmic episodes in the broader labor movement were pivotal in triggering regulatory changes at the state and federal levels. Unions began to gain traction in the early 20th century, demanding safer working conditions, standardized wages, and the right to collective bargaining. Meanwhile, legislation like the Fair Labor Standards Act introduced minimum wage and overtime pay, eroding the notion that a company could simply issue scrip in lieu of legal tender. With more worker-friendly regulations, the advantage of tightly controlling a workforce through housing and stores became less appealing, or at least less necessary. Furthermore, economic shifts, including the Great Depression and the post-World War II manufacturing boom, encouraged geographic diversification and suburbanization. Public infrastructure improved across the country, rendering it easier for workers to commute from independent towns and cities. As a result, many of these once thriving towns declined dramatically. When a single corporation hit financial trouble or found cheaper production methods elsewhere, entire communities could unravel. In the coal fields of Appalachia, population drain transformed some of these towns into ghostly shells of their former selves, complete with boarded-up storefronts and abandoned rows of identical homes. While a few survived by diversifying their economies or tapping into tourism, the era of the classic company town waned. For some places, like the remnants of Pullman, which was eventually annexed by Chicago, parts of the physical infrastructure still stand, repurposed for museums, schools, houses, and private businesses. Visitors roam these historic streets, marveling at the once utopian vision that soared so high, but in many ways came crashing down under the weight of its own contradictions. Reflecting on the broader arc of the company town reveals both uplifting and sobering lessons. On one hand, they illustrate the power of corporate organization to build communities quickly, equip them with modern conveniences, and in some cases, genuinely enhance the standard of living for workers. On the other hand, they underscore the dangers of concerted power. When a single entity owns the housing, controls the stores, and effectively sets local policy, workers' autonomy can be precarious at best and virtually non-existent at worst. Even though the heyday of the classic American company town is long past, echoes of its structure linger in surprising ways. Consider the sprawling corporate campuses of tech giants in Silicon Valley. While they don't literally own entire cities, or enforce the level of paternalism seen in, say, 19th century Pullman, They do provide a wide range of services: on-site gyms, cafeterias, childcare centers, dry cleaning, and even healthcare clinics. This raises fresh questions about whether convenience might also foster dependence. If your job, your meals, your exercise routine, and your social life all revolve around one corporate entity, how freely can you walk away? The differences from historical company towns are significant. Modern employees are typically free to live wherever they want, and labor laws are far more robust. But the philosophical question about balancing employee comfort with corporate control remains relevant. After all, company towns were never just about buildings or wages. They were microcosms of an era's grandest hopes and deepest anxieties, where economic ambition and social engineering collided head-on. Some flourished, many floundered, yet each one reveals a piece of the puzzle, illustrating the ever-evolving relationship between workers, employers, and the communities they inhabit. Whether you marvel at the ambition, recoil at the exploitation, or feel torn between the two, you are likely to leave with a new understanding of how profoundly a single company's vision can shape and sometimes unmake the lives of thousands. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. What are your thoughts on company towns? Do you think they would work in today's world, or are you happy they've become footnotes in history? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section, and while you're there, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an exciting episode of This House.